Well, here we are, back on a Monday afternoon, People Purpose Place. We're missing one of our three amigos in Rowan, who's just moved house, so he's under a bit of the pump by not being able to get in front of the internet. But we've drafted a third new amigo, and I'd like to introduce Oliver Jesshope, our guest for tonight. Appreciate you on short notice, and we've been working through the technicalities to get you on live. So appreciate you joining in tonight. How are you?
Yeah, great, man. Super keen to be here. Thank you so much, Darren, for having me. Yeah, I'm always keen to chat about anything to do with things you're up to, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Christine, how are you? I don't know whether you're still muted there or not. But we can't hear you. Can you hear her, Oliver?
No, it appears she might be muted.
Can you hear us at all? Yeah, we can't hear you. The amazing technologies.
If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong, right?
Normally what we try and do is we'll keep winging along and we'll go through a bit of the introduction bit, and then normally as things start to happen, Christine will normally be able to log back in once the technology starts to sort itself out.
Yeah. Okay.
And we definitely want Christine involved because we know we're going to have some conversations that will be really interesting for her to be involved in for sure. So obviously we're talking about People Purpose Place, but we sort of start to model some of the things that we've talked about a few times, Oliver, about, some of the area that we want to sort of concentrate on tonight is talking about, what are groups that you've been in, what are experiences you've had, and then maybe what tools we can essentially all have, which might help us be better groups. So as a part of that process, what we actually do is we have a check-in process. Now, the thinking behind the idea of having a check-in process is actually just more really to some extent to make us present in the moment we're in, and also to be present for the people we're here in the conversation with. Now, these conversations we have every Monday are all really engaging, so it's easy to be present, but this is sort of modeling that same sort of thinking. So the question I posed for today is, with the end of the year coming up and all the stress that comes towards the end of the year, upon reflection, what's something you can be grateful for in 2022?
I suppose I am grateful for, for a lot of the challenges that have arisen throughout this year in my taking on of a substantial amount of different projects here. It has been extremely challenging, but it's also been, equally rewarding in that it's helped me understand and gain better insight as to how to manage so many different things, because I've actually thrown myself in there and just tried to figure it out as I go. So I've been pretty grateful for that challenge. I suppose that's what has contributed most to my personal growth, I think, and will help me in the future to manage so many different things. And it's also helped me understand a little bit more about amalgamating some of these ideas that I've got for community development into something more central, because right now I do lots of different things everywhere, for some good reasons, but it sometimes can be helpful to just be focusing on one singular thing.
Yeah. How you going now, Christine? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Yay!
The old log on, log off trick works every time.
Log on, log off trick. It doesn't even require technical expertise, just Colby. Thank you, Colby.
Thanks for that, Oliver, because I also hear you a lot with that, as far as, you studying history would also be aware that they don't often document things that are just when good stuff happens. It's always about the challenge and overcoming the challenge and the difficulties and And also that resonates a lot with me because I have a tendency to get passionate about lots of projects, and there is that sometimes that balancing act of how do I make sure I'm making stuff happen in everything. So I think my own check-in before so the check-in question, Christine, for tonight was, got it? Cool. My moment to be grateful for, I think, is these conversations. So for the last period of time, we've been talking about what housing could look like, but to actually engage with lots of different people who are, including yourself, Oliver, and obviously Christine a lot, we've been able to thrash out and develop and improve the thinking around this concept. So I've been grateful for the fact that, in 2022 definitely feels like a bit of a watershed moment for the conversation. So I'm grateful for that. Christine?
I think that I want to express my gratitude to you and Rowan and to People Purpose Place because, boy, having this project, being part of this project is a huge thing for me. It's something I've wanted to do my whole life. And as you know, I've worked on various projects and not really gotten this done. So it's sort of feeling like my last project and my last opportunity to really leave a lasting gift to community.
Yes.
And I can't think of anything I'm more grateful for than this project and to you and Rowan.
Awesome. And that's much appreciated. And I think one of the things, and interestingly enough, when we talk about what happens with groups, I think some of the special things that have happened this year have been us trying to work through challenges and differences, and also synergies, finding that place where we can all come together. So I appreciate that as well. So we had a bit of a brief introduction to Oliver, but I was just going to, I noticed, and this is an interesting conversation for us all, that you had a chat just recently in one of the libraries. Did you go and do a bit of a presentation on UEP Newton and Bobby Seale?
Oh, this one was on Fred Hampton.
Okay,
right. But I did, of course, speak about them because, Fred Hampton, the presentation was on Fred Hampton. He was the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party in 1969. And, the Black Panther Party was actually founded by Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton on October the 15th, 1966. And they started that whole that party to, it was actually initially called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, and it was initially to get Panthers and people, particularly African-American people, to go out and patrol the police, like people who knew that their rights better than the police, and to make sure that they were adhering to the laws and not brutalizing the community. And then, of course, it started to expand outwards to have more of a community mindset, I suppose you could say, where they moved away from the guns and that self-defense rhetoric, which they still insisted upon, making sure people were able to defend themselves, but they started to look towards more towards other what they would consider ways that they might have been being oppressed by the state or by the police or whatever. And so they would do clothing runs. They would run the breakfast programs for impoverished kids in the community. They would do free sickle cell anemia testing for people in lower class communities, and a whole bunch of different things. I've got a book here actually that details like all the programs that they would do. I'm not too sure if you want me to read that all out, but they did a whole lot of things for the community. The point was, Huey P. Newton talks a lot about creating contradictions, because what they were fighting, at least in my understanding of it, was ideas. And you fight ideas by creating contradictions because they cause people to think. This is real. I'm paraphrasing the words of Huey P. Newton here. And so he was like, okay, well, where can we cause a contradiction in this world here? Because he wasn't too happy with the world that they had there. And, because people weren't well looked after in his opinion. And so by the Panthers basically stepping in and essentially doing the government's job for them, or what we all imagine the government should do for people, that caused people to that caused a split in people's idea of what the government was actually doing and what the Panthers were doing, because they were like, hang on, a lot of these Panthers are actually really here to help serve the community and help us make sure we're not suffering from poverty and police brutality and other forms of state oppression, whereas the government seemed to be not exactly catering to people of lower socioeconomic people's needs. So that's the general roundabout idea of the Black Panther Party and why we started. But I'll round this into the Fred Hampton bit. So the talk was about Fred Hampton and all the things that he did in Chicago in pretty much just a year's time, of being in the party and doing all the work he did. And I just presented on his life on the 53rd anniversary of his assassination, which was December 4th, 1969. The FBI had some sort of erroneous warrant under the false pretext of there being a weapons cache stored in Fred Hampton's apartment at the time, which was false. They just went in there and raided it and assassinated him. But before all that, Fred Hampton was doing so much to unite people in Chicago of different races. And, him and another man named Bob Lee would go around and talk with, gang members and other kinds of dangerous people who you probably don't really want to hang around, and convince them that their actual enemy is not each other, although they've had their disagreements. It's the state oppression that they were facing at the time. That's what they were saying. But I'll just
Well, I think this is actually probably a good segue, because we said just before you came on, Christine was probably floating around in the time that you're talking about, possibly in the same part of the world. So
yep.
I'm interested from your point of view, Christine, what was your experience of those moments, like, being someone around that era?
Well, of course, you do realize that when people hark back to the golden age, everybody, apparently, they've done scientific analysis of this, and the stats come out that everybody thinks their teenage years were the golden age. So good old days are always your teenage years.
Right.
Those were my teenage years. I was 1949. I'm a proper baby boomer. I am a baby boomer. And I spent my time in California before I came to Australia in 1970. I was marching to everybody, whether it was the Black Panthers. We didn't like the Black Panthers as much because we were hippies and we didn't like all the violence, but we recognized that there was so much violence being done to Black and poor people in America, and there still is. We're a little more subtle about our violence towards those who don't quite look like us in Australia, but
yes,
Americans have a pretty bad record. And so it was really a very uplifting time when we felt that we were making a huge difference to the world, that things had to loosen up, that there had to be more equality, that there had to be more less consumerism. Imagine, we thought back in the 60s, less consumerism. Anyway, it didn't really work out that way, did it?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because my question was going to be, after hearing both of you, was, and this idea of creating contradictions and trying to get people more aware of what the government's influences are and what they're supposed to be doing and what they're actually doing. We zoomed forward now, and we just talked about having gratitude for 2022. Do we feel we're any better than where you were? From Christine, from your experience, are we better or are we worse, or something?
We're better, but we've forgotten some of the lessons that should have been learned 50 years ago. And we've sort of, we've lost track of how important it was, what we tried to do. No, we did it in bed, dysfunctionally as a group, us hippies. But hey, what we wanted was to liberate people and to expand consciousness and expand life and make life more beautiful and bountiful for everybody. That's not a bad goal. No, absolutely not.
And what about you, Oliver? How do you feel after reading so much about the Panthers and what they're attempting to do? How do you think we are in comparison to their times? Are we better than? Have we improved from where they were, or are we gone nowhere?
Well, I could really speak a lot to that. I'm just trying to find a way to be concise here.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, because I could talk about what Huey's perspective was, and I could talk about some other Panthers, but at least attempt to represent some of the things that I've heard them say.
Yes.
But I think, in my opinion, I think just seeing from my experience reading about it, because I wasn't there, I didn't experience it. I think a lot of things have like changed, and I think the way I'm looking at the Panthers, for example, one way I kind of see them is like they were just this force for they did have some, like, I think part of their goals were to to change America into, I imagine, to be something more of a communistic state, which I'm personally not the view of, but that's what they were really attempting to do. And perhaps some of them might feel that it was unsuccessful because that didn't happen. However, my perspective on it is that it was very successful, because although I'm personally sad to see that the Panthers, like, they kind of disintegrated in a way, just because they didn't really have anyone else to like learn from when they were doing. Maybe they did, because they did read a lot, but they were kind of just doing it. Just they threw themselves into it, they were figuring it out as they went, type thing. And it's like, well, you can't really expect them to foresee every single little detail and attack that would happen. So I can't really blame them for the way things kind of ended up with the party disintegrating. But I think it was largely successful because they the government, I'm pretty sure this is a fact that like there weren't exactly many programs happening in many places of the world that did the breakfast programs. I'm pretty sure the Panthers initiated that and got governments to adopt that. And I'm pretty sure in America there are a few other little programs that the Panthers started running, which the government then started to take over. So although the Panthers themselves, like that entity, is no longer existent, it kind of disintegrated and disseminated itself into into society in other ways. And it's felt, but it's not exactly seen or heard. Their presence is still there because they changed the way people think about community and community organizing. And I think that's something that I think can be learned. So I do think something came of it.
Yeah, cool.
And they were the original ones who really wanted to push for better housing for poor people.
Right.
So
right.
I mean, here's the connection. They thought that housing was primary.
Yeah. Wow.
Housing is primary. And of course, what you have to remember about that particular time is that communism now, in my view, because I'm quite educated about different ideologies, communism has never been tried. Proper socialism has never been tried. So we have democratic socialist countries that are the happiest countries in the world with the highest GDPs. But so Northern Europe, Scandinavia. But the whole point is that nobody had tried communism, so it was possible to dream of it, so it hadn't failed. And now people see communism as failed states. Look at Russia, but they're not doing communism. They're doing authoritarianism. That's dictatorship. That's oligarchy. It's not communism. It has nothing to do with communism. So what the Black Panthers unfortunately did was push a political ideology into the foreground that made people Americans hate Black people even more, which was, that was so contradictory. And it turned out that it wasn't necessary. But at the moment, what do you know? You know what your heart says and what you know is wrong. And that's where the Black Panthers, in my view, even though they ascribed to violence, they were pushed into a corner. All poor Black people were pushed into a corner at that point in the States. And they had to come out with guns blazing. There was nothing else.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it was a deep and important time and a deep and important change in American society. The way it sort of fell out was different than the way people imagined it.
And I think Absolutely. And I think, not that I expected this conversation to go here, but it's almost like you've highlighted something else there. We've used the word contradiction a few times, and the fact that if governments can't provide that solution, that other people have got to go in there and provide that contradiction, which is the alternative way of looking at things or the alternative way of doing things, which we could probably talk about the Black Panthers forever. But if we're going to segue somewhat back into
Housing.
somewhat back into housing, I suppose, and we should never even use ourselves in the same sentence as the Black Panthers, but the lesson that they gave us maybe is that humans, us individual people, need to find ways to create contradictions in the system so that other people can then grasp onto those contradictions and say, yeah, you're right. And the contradiction we're trying to work on is to say the housing solutions we currently have are not for the people, by the people. They're for the institutions, controlled by the institutions, without getting all conspiracy theory about it. It's just how shit's rolled out over time, right? And we know that all of that underlying stuff is control-based. So it's just easier to control with the mechanisms we currently have. And that's where, hopefully People Purpose Place has its space, which is to create that contradiction for people to go, well, there's no electric car for housing. Maybe we can provide that option. So not knowing a lot about your complete background, Oliver, can you explain maybe or walk back through in your life, in your 22 long years, while Christine sits over there at 76.
73.
Yeah, 73, and says, I was I was there when the Black Panthers were there. How have you, just as because we're I'm older and Christine's older, so from your living experiences, how have you had to live in houses? Like, what's been the different configurations? Mum and dad, or yourself, or in group homes, or what have you done? Like, what's been your experiences?
Yeah, this will be interesting because it's usually something that I just don't talk about with people, but yeah, this will be cool. But yeah, I've lived at home for I've lived in this home since I was I think maybe like 3 or something, and then I've lived there until like late after high school. I think I was maybe 20. Yeah, when I moved out, and I lived with one of my friends for a while, and that was really cool. I was living in like an apartment in North Ward, and that was fun. And but like I got that because I was friends with him, and my friend had an agreement with his mate who owned the apartment to get like a pretty decent rent. I think it was about like $150, and I thought that was like incredibly decent for the place that we're in. We're in like a like an actual like apartment, like with that overlooked the Strand type thing. So that was so that was like really cool. I didn't stay there for too long though. Maybe like 4 or 5 months, if I remember correctly, because this was 2020. And then so I moved back in with my parents after that, and then and then I moved out again shortly after, like a brief stay at home, and then I moved out again with another friend that I know for about the same price, and that was really cool. Like my experiences living out of home was like, it was good because like I made sure I saved up like enough to just in case I needed extra money and whatever. But it was just myself and another friend and her daughter. And that was kind of it.
And it's interesting because a lot of that comes back to so moving out of home was a chance for you to find your own space and place. Is that what you were sort of looking for?
Yep. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yep.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I saw just recently come up on one of the Facebook pages of Everything Townsville or whatever. And this you'll find this too interesting, Christine, where the bloke got on there and said, I've got my granny flat for rent. And it starts at $350 a week. No children, no pets. And I was like, right. And I was underneath all the comments, and of course, people are going, like, what the hell? This is highway robbery. But he's like, well, that's what I can charge, and other people will pay that. So that's what it is. So those opportunities you've had at $150 a week, Oliver, are probably in the big scheme of things right now are probably almost impossible, I would imagine.
I'm not too sure what I know that some of these like rents are pretty crazy, but I'm probably not as acquainted with some of those details as you are, but I can certainly give some of my experience. And
yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things that you said before about some of the projects that you've sunk your teeth into this year, and one of them obviously is around what democracy might look like moving forward and that sort of stuff, which is probably why you've had that passion back towards having conversations about the Black Panthers. Are obviously creating a very different way to look at things. But what other projects have you been involved with this year? What's been your big long list of things you've tried to rip tear on?
Well, there's of course I'll start with the People Things group. So I started People Things around about the same time last year, and that is essentially a group where we get together and practice democracy at the grassroots level, with your community, with the people around you. Because in my experience of going to politicians and people in council, I personally have had challenges with those people, but I also have sympathy for them in that they can't always do everything for us, and even the ones that do want to support good projects, it's not always possible. So I come at it from that neutral, in the middle angle, that we need a new system that can actually, help people, just kind of bypass some of the rules that tend to be barriers to prevent, good things from happening. So I started that group, and I've done a number of different I'll go back a step. So it's really to promote the idea of more of getting people together and practicing direct democracy. So I think I've explained this to you, Darren, before, and for whoever's watching, direct democracy is essentially different from the current democratic model in Australia.
Representative democracy. Yeah.
Well, we have representative democracy right now.
Correct.
But it doesn't exactly work the way I think most people would like it to work. And so direct democracy is an alternative whereby citizens get together and discuss solutions to a particular matter. There's more to it than that, but I'll leave it there for now. I started that project. I've done a few different assemblies with people, and everyone's been really supportive and keen on it. The last one I did was maybe mid-year, and I haven't done anything since because I've been, as I'm going to get into it, I've been working on a bunch of other things. I've been doing stuff with Jasmine from Youth Reset, helping her with establishing that name and helping with the admin side of things, and just being someone for her to bounce ideas off and figure things out together. And Youth Reset is really about getting people to return to themselves and just take a moment for themselves to reflect and breathe properly, and just kind of reconnect and get off the phones for a sec. That's the main focus of Youth Reset, where we just have sessions where people can come in, do some mindfulness and breathing techniques, and generally people always feel better after these sessions, which is really cool. There's nothing really that I'm aware of that's quite like this in at least Queensland. I don't know about Australia. I haven't checked everywhere. But so I've been doing that. There's been some cool happenings with the Mushroom Group where I've been running these Mushroom Monday workshops for people in Townsville to learn about basic mushroom cultivation, so that, because I think it'd be really cool for all, so many people to start to learn more about mushroom cultivation, because we can do so much with mushrooms. That is the exotic edible ones, not always the magic mushrooms as people tend to assume. Because I've got long hair.
I'm an old hippie. Let's eat them all.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they come from the earth. So yeah. Anyway, so I've been doing that sort of stuff. Isn't doing the workshops, and we're now at the stage where we are developing our spawn production for our group. So we'll be doing so that we can help more people and get more mushrooms out to people to grow their mushrooms on some coffee
To grow
grounds.
like mushrooms.
Yeah.
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 But I have a question about your direct democracy, because
Sure, yeah. Ties into this, so,
direct democracy is meant to also help people grow like mushrooms, expand, and become more aware of neighbors and differences, and more able to discuss and come to agreements, to face up to conflicts and things like that. I mean, the only place that I know of where people still do direct democracy that matters in the free world, in the more advanced world, is in Switzerland, of course, where some cantons still stand on the town square and vote.
Wow.
But
right.
we have very few. We have very few examples of direct democracy. So, how do you find things to decide about in your group, Oliver? And what becomes contentious for you? And what exercises do you have to help people get through, sticky points, which happen with every group?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the things, as I call it, because thing is just the Old Norse word for a public assembly, usually in the realm of a political type matter. So the things that I've had, the group assemblies that I've organized, have usually been about ideas. So it's usually been about something to do with, generally in the realm of how can we improve our community, and that's been the main question that I've set, and then people who are interested in that topic will come together and discuss how they can do that. And I'll just basically run them through just a 4-step process of, looking at, okay, well, what is assessing what our situation is, assessing, how we can get from point A to B, looking at, we dream big, but then we also kind of bring it back to reality as well. But so that's kind of the general process, more or less. But in dealing with conflict, I haven't actually yet had any serious conflicts in these groups, which has been interesting. But how I would deal with it, how I've dealt with other conflicts before with people, is I do my very best. I've got it here, to practice the little nonviolent communication. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
We know it well.
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah, you probably know it way better than
Yeah.
I
Oh,
do.
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's really challenging.
Oh, shit, yeah.
You know what? If I'm being honest here, there's been a couple times when I've just looked at it and I've completely thrown it out the window, because some people, I don't know if it works, but I still do. No, yeah, I still do attempt to be as like non-violent in my communication as possible, even when there are really challenging conflicts, because I remember to tell myself that even when it's really challenging, that is the moment that you're meant to implement that. It's not when it's all kind of easy. It's when it's actually really difficult. That's when you really need to use it. So yeah, I've just really used some techniques from that book, really inquiring into where people's feelings are coming from, and making sure that person feels like I've heard them. That's really the main thing that I do my best to do when there are conflicts. There is a lot more to that book, as you know, but that's been the main thing that I've really held to in dealing with conflict.
Well, we've thought of having, if we start to get our groups together, which we're starting to do now, of course, in our view, agreements and arrangements and how the procedure of making agreements, the learning of how to get along with people on a different basis than if you can go and lock yourself in your house after yelling at your neighbor, which I guess happens. I don't yell at my neighbors, but thank heavens I have lovely neighbors. But the question is, what do we use? What tools do we use? And we've built up a toolbox for helping people get through conflictual situations, for helping them work on their inner selves, for helping them open up to others. But the big question is, when the rubber hits the road, how hard is it? Well, it's hard. And what we've thought is that perhaps using something like, there is a course called Compassionate Conversations. They only charge $72 a year. I think it's American bucks, so $100 a year. And you can join in for the whole year. And we thought that might be a springboard. And basically, those compassionate conversations are directly taken from nonviolent communication. So do you think that's a sort of a basis that we can use for helping people to return to direct democracy in small groups?
Yeah, I personally think so. Like anything nonviolent communication, I think would just be absolutely excellent. I think, yeah, like me personally, I think one of the big challenges is actually getting people there in the first place. Like, I've thought over this quite a lot. I'm sure you both have, right? Like,
Yes.
yeah, like, how are we going to have a conversation about something really like heated, like, anything?
Anything.
It's something like, like gay marriage or climate change or abortion, whatever. They're like, there's no way I'm going to that. I want to have a nice chilled out Saturday. I do not want to be arguing with some stranger in person because most conflict takes place online these days. It could be challenging. But
I'm
that's
so
just
interested to hear this, Oliver.
Pardon?
This is fascinating. Do you think it's getting harder because people are becoming trolls online and don't know how to deal with their conflicts face to face anymore?
Absolutely.
Because I don't think we were very good at that before, quite frankly.
Yeah. I personally think that I think the more, like, there's a Jordan Peterson quote where he says, like, conflict avoided is conflict multiplied. And I've been poring over that as well lately. Like, it is better to have a small, immediate conflict that you probably really don't want to have, but it's better to do that than just kind of let it prolong. And that is effectively what has happened with a lot of social media stuff, right? Like we all know people get siphoned off into little, corners of, like political corners that just where the same thing is happening, the echo chamber, they say, right? And yeah, I've been there. And when I've been in those places and I've been considering other points of view, that is when I've tended to kind of find myself in my own little corner after that.
The naughty corner.
but that's a very interesting experience, isn't it? That you're actually stepping up to something that most 22-year-old Australian males, do not step up to.
No.
And that is so beautiful. But of course, you're going to have some terrible experiences along the way because you're leading. And even though we start, this has been going on for decades, you're still leading because leadership is required. And people don't want to know about it often. You just have to hang out with those who do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I pulled some other things out of there too. And Please. It's probably worth, actually, I know you do a lot of reading, but I'm actually reading that book at the moment called Compassionate Conversations. And it's definitely very good to read. And I wonder whether next time that you have some of these conversations, if you can get the people there, it would actually good to be able to have some not manufactured conflict, but certainly a chance for people to work through what happens when it all doesn't go well. Because an interesting technique which I've just read that they use this idea of initially finding out what we all have in similar, so that we have this place of commonality, and then also saying, hey, these are the things that we're different on, as explicit, so we can all see the differences. And then something I found really quite interesting that she uses is this idea of 3 versions of the truth. So if I, meaning this is my truth, or and then we, which is we can agree that this is the truth, and then it, which is actually the truth, right? Which doesn't have an opinion and it doesn't have a view or any of those things attached to it. Now, the interesting thing is, what she asks is that if you're in a store, if you're presenting your version or you're speaking to the crowd, you can never use we or it. As in, you can't say we all assume this is the truth or this is the absolute truth. You must use the I word. So I say this and I say that, so that ultimately you're not hiding behind someone else's view. You're stating your own opinion. And then hopefully through non-violent communication, you can find a place back for better understanding. So I think there could be some really good tools that you use, but in the first instance, as you said, you've got to get the people along to be able to engage in these conversations. But I'm intrigued. I mean, we've had some quite in-depth conversations. Isn't it funny that I feel really good? Like when Christine and I, we went for a walk last time we were up there, and we started waxing lyrical about spiral theory, spiral dynamics, and understanding where it crosses over it. And that is an enriching moment. Like I feel good after I finish that, right? So good, in-depth, robust conversation. We didn't agree with each other. We probably have divergences over where this thing might cross over or where that thing might cross over. But the debate between two people who have respect for each other ends up being fulfilling. So I find it interesting that when we have these conversations, and all the people I speak to, and you and I, Oliver, have gone off and debated, Marcus Aurelius and all of that other stuff. But from that, we feel enriched for the conversation, right? Yeah. So why are we all running away from that? I wonder.
That's a good question. So this is my take on that. I think a lot of conflict that I've witnessed, where people aren't willing to have those discussions, it's because they have their so I think it's because they have their identity tied to the issue that needs resolving, or the issue itself. And so to discuss the issue is to discuss the identity of the person on which their whole identity is founded upon. So I'll just speak to some experience that I've had. So with one particular environmental group, Extinction Rebellion, I had some experiences with when I would go in and present ideas about particular other ways of resolving the issue of climate change. Oftentimes there was kind of a lot of resistance to those ideas because I personally felt like that some of them were actually geared to really getting to the nitty-gritty bottom of it.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of crazy things that kind of went on there, but that's effectively what it was. And that was one of my key learnings when I kept scratching my head, like, why aren't these people keen on this idea? Like, I wasn't asking a lot. I was saying that I would take on some of these other projects and do it with them because, they've got a name and they've got people there that are keen to follow and all that. And I just kept encountering challenges, as many as I was with the council. And I was like, hang on, what is actually going on here? And I really think that must be it, and I actually went through that, like you can't tie your identity to, it's hard not tying it to like a cause or whatever, because it's fun, because it's like, you've got that group there to, hang out with. And that's something that we don't exactly have much of these days, right? Because we're tribal beings, right? For the most part, humans have been in tribes, and we don't exactly have that. And so when we join a group, we get that feeling. But it kind of, for other people that are really interested in solving the matter, it causes other problems. That's kind of.
No, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. And I have heard, like, even a conversation I had last week, Christine, when I was talking to that Nick, he'd mentioned one of the things he found interesting is because he was always bringing creativity to groups, like, why don't we do this and why don't we do that and whatever. There's a large percentage of people who really like status quo, right? So
absolutely.
So they were finding this very disconcerting. So sometimes a group needs consistency and plod. But as you said, one of the challenges with that is you can become so solidified in your version of what the truth is, which again comes back to this I version, or maybe a we version, which might actually be separate to the it, which is the actual truth. So you can form like your group vision of the truth, but it may be completely not the truth. And I found this, because I come from a sustainability background, over time I've had to soften my approach to things like, say, as a classic example, alternative energy. Not all alternative energy is alternative energy. Like it's not all a good thing. Like just because it's not using a coal-fired power station doesn't give it all ticks. And I know you did a bit of did you share a story, or you did a bit of a story yourself on the fact that, some of these wind farms are just getting on the top of mountains and just wiping all of this forest,
Yeah, yeah,
and just putting through roads through the middle of beautiful habitat and all the rest of it. So not all things are equal. So some of those things that I used to adamantly defend, I've sort of had to pull back from and then take in the full approach and go, there's good bits, but let's not give everything a tick.
yeah.
Just
You and me both.
yes. But it can be, as you said, I think one of the things is maybe we're protecting our own version of ourselves. And I think men are sometimes worse at this than women, maybe, Christine, that I find sometimes men become so entrenched in the version of themselves that they struggle to step back. What do you think?
Well, I think that, I still believe there are probably, there's a gender range, and most of us fit into two genders.
Yes.
But there are a lot of exceptions, and everybody's a mixture.
Yeah.
So my thought about this is that it isn't, men have certain disadvantages, and one of them is that you're still brought up as little kids with parents who say, don't cry, be a big boy, be brave. Well,
yes.
I say, stuff that. Girls have a lot easier time because they aren't told not to cry. That's simple, and people have a tendency to want baby boys to be big boys, which is dumb. So how do we find a way to pull those things together? Well, I think it's very difficult. And I would say from my own experience that the loss of identity is incredibly important. I was always, Michael, who we've had on this podcast, who knows me very well, said, you are the most robust person in health I've ever met until you weren't. So I suddenly had to go from, super energetic, super healthy, superwoman to sick. That ruined my identity as Mrs. Healthy, Mrs. Take on Everything, Mrs. Energetic. And I'm still struggling 6 years later with exactly that identity crisis. So I think this is not a small thing. It's not a small thing for women. Mm-hmm. It's not a small thing for men. I think men have some disadvantages, and I think women do too.
Yeah, right.
And whatever blend of male and female we are, we have that blend of disadvantages, so to speak.
No doubt, and I think you're right. I mean, I really love that something you said before there, Oliver, as well, with the whole youth reset. One of the things we've tried to think about with our toolbox is to add as many things in there as you can. And one of the things that we have found, and I appreciate you before, sharing your story about, where you've been living and that sort of stuff, which is obviously not stuff that comes up in, hey, by the way, how you going? How you've been living.
No.
It's not. But I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that mindfulness and the breath techniques, we've had a couple of meetings with Christine where we've had a group of people who come from very, very different backgrounds with extremely different understandings of the issues we were talking about. But through vulnerability and our ability to find a sense of empathy for the group, in literally what was an afternoon, we formed quite a strong sense of what that group was. And I think some of that comes back to some of these techniques, which are about, we think if a person can be the best version of themselves, they're going to be a hell of a lot better at being the best version in a group.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. 100%. 100% agree.
100%.
I like just recently I've been having some reflections on this, and I recall hearing a story about not that I'm exactly, by the way, whenever I talk about historical figures, it doesn't necessarily mean I love everything that they do. I pull out good bits. I just want people to know that, so that they can chill when I say someone crazy. But someone like Genghis Khan, who obviously he did a lot of things. He moved a lot of people, and he was he was pretty much like top of the chain, right? Like he's the big warlord dude, right? Every time, this is what I'm told, like before battles and stuff, he would go into the forest and just meditate and sit there with himself and think about things before he would, be ready to do something really intense and life-threatening and dangerous, and I think that speaks volumes about, what returning into your mind and into your heart can do for you, like even Napoleon would also do something similar before battles. I read and hear about things that he did, and he supposedly would sit with himself and he'd find his calm first, because there's no way you can do anything until you sink into your calm, which is what is taught at the reset thing, right? Just coming in, relaxing, finding that inner peace part of yourself, and then he would visualize how he would go about the next, whether it was a battle or whether it was dealings with people or things throughout his day, would visualize it and imagine the things playing out the way he wanted them to. And that tends to work for him. And I've done that before also, and it has also worked for me when I'm going about stuff, just visualizing everything that would happen. And I think you get the most benefit from it by just being present. I think
I'm going to express a wish. I hope you're not getting calm and peaceful and then deciding how you're going to rape, pillage, and kill. Because I think that's what Genghis Khan did a lot of.
Yeah. I see.
But I love the example. I love the example. I'm not so mean to be silly, but the example is a fantastic one, because I didn't know that about Genghis Khan. I know stupid things like what percentage of Europeans had Genghis Khan's genes in them, because he was such a prolific raper, pillager, and looter.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
And but I don't sort of imagine you in that same mold,
I think this is important. I think this is actually an important conversation as well, though, because one of the things, you're right. I mean, as soon as we mention anything about everyone assumes we take on board all of their shit, right? So just because you mention, Genghis Khan doesn't mean you're going to put everyone's head on a pike. And I think also even some of the stuff to do with, I honestly believe that we can't go back in history and use our 2022 lens and start to criticize someone else. And I know there's some really bad shit, and I don't condone any of it, but I also can't go back there and say, hey, by the way, you guys, what have you done? Because ultimately we weren't there, and I love that statement of Viktor Frankl's, where he says all the good Jews didn't survive. And that was a statement about himself in a way. So it was a way to say, I had to make decisions to survive, and the really, really good Jews didn't survive because they gave their life, or they sacrificed for their children or their parents or whatever.
Or their principles.
Just
their principles.
Correct. So, he's written a book on, the meaning of life, or what's the meaning, and, the philosophy of no one can take your thought. And yet he even makes the statement, all the good Jews didn't survive those concentration camps. So I think,
he survived.
And he survived, yes.
Yeah.
And went on to make a powerful impact on so many people's lives by his reflections as well. So just one event does not make you a bad person, or making decisions which might in the fullness of time appear not to be good ones aren't always necessary. We can't criticize them now. So so that's really cool. And I really like the fact that hopefully those techniques that you're providing the youth with is also something they can find transferable. So when we go to talk about, groups in the fullness of time, about, hey, if it turns out that young people can't purchase a home by themselves, and they make a conscious decision to say, well, what happens if 5 of us join together and we look to buy this property? Then how can we get through those bits and maybe not take the assumptions, because I'm sure you've seen badly formed groups, like when groups just all come together. If you're developing these projects, you can certainly see malfunctioned groups. Have you experienced those groups where they've all just been formed together and, without any control measures or agreements or whatever, that they don't run well?
Yeah, I personally have. yeah, I'm just like thinking about like what they could do differently. I think yeah, sometimes people can get caught up. Even Fred Hampton was saying this, the guy that I did the presentation on. He in one of his videos online, he says, you know, people can kind of get caught up in the whole momentum and the excitement of a movement that they can kind of miss the point of it. That's what he said back in '69, and I see that today. And you know, it's just what happens. It's exciting. It's fun. It's really cool. So, you know, cool things are happening. It's exciting. But it is so important that you remember. Yeah, that's cool. You know this.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It's just important to remember your reason and your purpose for doing so. I think this is really if I could boil it down to one thing, I would just tell everyone that gets involved in this sort of thing, even people that I don't even agree with, I would tell them to read The Art of War and read more strategy. Some strategy, like a lot of it, it can be taken the wrong way and used for good, because it's, to me, I see it as like basically like raw power, and you can use that for a purpose that is productive and helpful to society, or you can use it for other for other ways that
nefarious ways,
for whatever else, right? And that might not have a great effect. But I think really getting people to understand strategy and how things actually kind of work when you're dealing with groups of people is absolutely so important. I could not emphasize that more, I don't think. People need to like see that more and read it. It only takes about an hour to read that book.
It's not very big, is it?
No.
And I agree with you there, something that we've come back and retested. So, you know, we've quite often learned a lot of tools, and then time goes on and then you stop using them, and then you go back, why we're using those things. And one of the things that we wanted to bring more back into a lot of our meetings is this idea of intent, which is what you talk to. And I heard in compassionate conversations, one of the ladies in that uses or tries to explain intent as purpose with a time. So if you have purpose which can be stretched out over time, that is actually your intent. So the idea that to some extent intent is a window to the future purpose. So by restating your intent regularly, what it does is, so what are we actually here for? Like if we're really looking for this thing, why the hell are we over here talking about that thing?
That's something I've definitely seen a lot of.
Yeah, we've all seen that. We've all made that mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing which I'm interested in is I think if we could call out in a way that was productive in groups, I think would be interesting, because something you mentioned is, I heard a bloke by the name of Jamie Wheels say this statement, and I'm thinking about it in greater depth on how you would identify it. But if you had a situation, he made a statement that after the fun of a group forming and everyone's excited and you've done all that sort of stuff, eventually you end up with humans, right? And we're all fucked, right? So we've got our own little things wrong with us, right? And his statement was, after the fun of a group is formed, quite often what happens is I start looking at you from my shadow at your shadow.
Yeah.
Now, and you look at me from your shadow.
Yes, I'm looking from my broken shadow. I'm looking at you going, and I think when you mentioned before about those groups that might have failed, they might have gone, hang on, I'm looking from my shadow, which is I've got this little kingdom here, and this bloke who comes in with beautiful long hair and a beard, and he's trying to take some of my power away from this situation. Now, if we could remove our shadows and be honest about our shadows, and one of the things I try to do, I don't do it well, but I do just try to feel my shadow coming up. Like when I'm making stupid conversations, I start to go, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, why am I having this opinion? Am I protecting my version of myself more than respecting the other person I'm with? And I wondered if we could find a way, and I think groups might need to get to that level of explicitness where we can say, I see your shadow, you see my shadow, and when those things come out, can we talk about it?
Great.
Can I actually ask something? Can I do
ask.
So what led you to be that to have that reflective mindset, Darren, to be observing of your own shadow.
Yeah, Darren, you grew up in Townsville. What brought you to this place of awareness and mindfulness and thoughtfulness? That is
I reckon
Townsvillian characteristic.
I reckon two factors is, and without going into my whole personal history, I've had did have a great childhood, right? But my childhood brokenness is that my biological father wasn't around when I was growing up, right? So I had these tensions inside me as an adult, and the only or even as a child, and the only reason I've been able to understand them is because early in my life, I grew up around a lot of women.
Right.
So I didn't have, until my now dad came along, I didn't have a lot of men around me. I had a lot of women around me. And I think it's by pure luck, right? I'm not fucking smart by doing this, but I think what's happened is it created a slightly higher amount of emotional intelligence by being around women as a man. Because when you talked about that stuff before, Christine, I think some of that is because men try to pass on to men, you need to be strong, you need to be better, don't, smack, this, whereas I didn't have to have that. So
isn't that interesting? I've never heard you say that, but that is fascinating.
And I think that's it. So I think I can see my broken bit. Like I saw my broken bit because of the fact that I had this emotional intelligence, which was passed on by having a higher percentage of women for me growing up.
You know what my thought is right now? I think that because these things, we've been speaking quite generally this whole hour. It's time for us to go to bed. It's time for me to go to bed. But what I really want to, I think we've gone quite deep in many ways, and certainly getting to shadow work is fabulous as far as I'm concerned, especially in a public forum. I love that. But how are we, when do we get together with Oliver, just you and me and Oliver and Rowan, or whoever wants to join in, and start to frame up how Oliver would see this, how he would design this, because I think we need that input, that fresh input, plus someone who's dealing with the exact problems of this society now with young people. And I think we need then to book Oliver again in 8 weeks' time. But in the meantime, Oliver, would you be willing to have a few conversations with us?
Absolutely.
I just think the way you think and the way you work through things is really inspirational, and I just want more of it.
Cool. Yeah.
And I hope the audience does too.
Yeah. I mean, every time I have a chat with Darren, we just have like the best chat. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I do also admit that we know there's a group of people who are disenfranchised with housing who are older women. We know that's a defined group of people who are broken, right? So generally, there's not, other than those who've gone through marriage separation, there's not generally a lot of old crusty white males who've got a problem with housing, right? We're probably the people who caused it, not the people who are solving it. So one thing that I have thought in my brain is that someone like yourself, Oliver, we use the word have done enough work, and I now understand that to be open enough, gone on a journey to be open enough to ideas that are beyond what you would normally take in. So I can tell you're a person who's done some work, and like all of us, you're on a journey somewhere. And I think that gives you a unique position to understand why we're trying to do it, and then also to communicate with a better face than a grey-haired white man to another group of people who need to hear what we're talking about. And I think they cross over all these things that you are talking about as well. So I think it crosses over, why doesn't democracy work is still the same problem as why can't we get groups of people to form better and work in a household unit. So I think we're solving lots of problems by working on something small.
Yeah.
Oliver comes up with another idea that he's got to say. I love it.
I just wanted to tie that to the strategy, the reason why I get people to talk about strategy, because you were just saying about from what it sounded like you were talking about, Darren, is like you've identified like you were saying like, you know, there seems to be a theme that is recurring here that may be the reason why people are disenfranchised with democracy, and it also could be the cause of the housing issues and probably a plethora of other issues as well. See, you know, like sometimes in the art of war, like when you think like Sun Tzu kind of suggests when he's talking about you know, strategy, it's like there's always like, it doesn't matter how big or small the enemy or the obstacle it is that you face, because there's always going to be something that you can pick on. See, if it's just now when you were talking, like there's a whole bunch of problems and that can be overwhelming, but it's also like the silver lining there is that they all share a common theme, and then so we can direct our focus towards that common theme to address all the problems. So that's what I'm talking about when I say people need to look at strategy more, because oftentimes a lot of the stuff I've done has been in the promoting environmental matters, right? And a lot of, in particular, young people, like everyone really, but young people, I've seen them get like really depressed, and so they won't even often take action about it because they're already defeated. But like, you know, as I said, if we had it more of that strategic mindset, we'd be like, you know, hang on, there's actually a few little things here that we can actually solve, and the problem actually isn't as big as we think it is. You know, that's really what I'm wanting to convey to people when I talk about the strategy. But yeah, I just really had to add that.
Yeah, no, awesome.
Just beautiful, and I want more of your attitude. So when we get offline, we'll collect up email addresses and we'll make an appointment to get together with you. And I really look forward to that. So thank you, Oliver. This is a great session. Are we going to do a checkout question, Darren?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you've done very good at rounding us off as well, Christine. So thank you for that. Otherwise, we'd end up going all night. And I think so. Maybe if we had a checkout question, how do you feel like tonight went? And I might even go first, so I can model it. Although we didn't really get to, and sometimes we really do try to focus back onto purely the housing conversation. And although we never really got to that in a lot of detail, I really felt the conversation was valid and really important, because it talked to the biggest problem we have with housing, which is how do groups of people work through their differences as humans, but also understand their synergy as a community. So I'm grateful for the conversation, and I learned a lot. So that means it's a good conversation. Oliver?
Yeah. I thought it was really fun. I'm always keen to chat with you, Darren and Rowan, and like when Rowan's here. And it's great to meet you, Christine. I would absolutely love to talk more about the Black Panther stuff and the things that you've done. Because like, seriously, I tell people, like, if you get me started on the Panthers, I'm probably like, you know, unless you stop me, I'm not going to probably stop. So I think next time it'd be great to we'll speak more to the purpose of these chats, I suppose, and how it relates to housing. I can certainly speak to that from some of the things I've read about the Panthers' perspective on that.
And from your own perspective, which, I mean, you have this beautiful perspective that you have really consciously developed. That's so important. And I'm just impressed. But I want to do my checkout as Darren, I think you said it so well. I don't want to say anything extra.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well done. And that's the beauty of going last, Oliver. You get to sort of, I normally go last so I can pigtail off everyone else. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it. It's our last one for the year, and I know I'll catch up with Rowan directly, and I would like to say thank you to everyone, and I really appreciate it, and have a really great night. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thanks,
thank
everyone.
You all very much.
And thank you, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Cool. Thanks, Darren.
See you.
Catch you later.
Bye-bye.